Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Explainer. Today, we're going to explore a really fundamental paradigm shift in how we view the natural world. I mean, if you've ever walked through a forest or maybe just sat in a quiet garden and felt that deep sense of peace, you already know there's this profound connection between humans and nature. But today, we're going to look at that connection through a very specific lens: Native American wisdom and oral histories, specifically focusing on the teachings of sacred plants. We are going to completely rethink what a plant actually is, not just as, something green that grows in the dirt, but as a deeply complex entity. So let's dive right into this. Okay, listen to this quote. Plants are not merely biological resources, but living beings, teachers, and spiritual allies. That single sentence is absolutely crucial. It's really the hook of our entire explainer today. You see, in many indigenous worldviews, the natural world just isn't a collection of things waiting to be used or sold. It's a whole community of beings. Plants are literally viewed as our oldest living relatives. They carry ancient knowledge. And because of that, they demand the exact same patience, humility, and reverence you'd owe to a respected elder in your own family. By shifting our perspective to this idea of kinship, it just unlocks a completely different, much deeper way to interact with our environment. So, here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start off with plants as living teachers, then we'll look at the sacred smoke trinity. Next up is the power of community, followed by the wisdom of the bear, and finally, we're going to wrap up with the ethics of the harvest. Let's get started.
All right, part one, plants as living teachers, and this massive paradigm shift.
So there is this massive gap we need to talk about between how modern Western culture views nature and the deeply relational worldview held by Native American traditions. It's like night and day. On one side, we have the idea of the plant as a commodity. In this framework, a plant is basically just valued for biological extraction, right? It's broken down in a lab into compounds for pills or mass processed for us to consume. But on the flip side, we have the living teacher. For example, in the creation frameworks of tribes like the Coahuila of Southern California, there's this really beautiful concept of the Nukatum, which translates to ancient beings. In these traditions, plants emerged at the dawn of time, way before there were grocery stores or pharmacies, and they actively stepped forward. Actually, scratch that. They didn't just step forward, they acted as self-sacrificing relatives, offering their leaves, their seeds, and their smoke so early humans could literally survive. They aren't passive sources at all. They're active allies who made a choice to help us. Moving right along to Section 2, the sacred smoke trinity: tobacco, sage, and sweetgrass. Building on that idea of plants as intentional allies, let's take a look at three of the most foundational sacred plants in indigenous traditions. Now, these are often used as tools for ceremony and prayer, but they aren't just generic, interchangeable herbs. They have very distinct, almost professional spiritual job descriptions. There's this brilliant rule of three when it comes to these sacred plants, and their roles complement each other perfectly. First up, we have tobacco, specifically a variety called Nicotiana rustica. Think of this as the mediator. In lots of origin stories, this was given as the very first plant. Its energetic action is basically to serve as a direct telephone line, bridging the human world to the creator. That's why it's a strict, transactional currency of respect that you offer before you even ask for guidance. Next is white sage. This is the eraser. Its role is an environmental and spiritual reset. It actively clears a room of heavy, stagnant, or negative energy. And finally, we have sweetgrass, which is viewed as the literal hair of Mother Earth. This one is the welcomer. Its job is to invite harmony right back in, filling the room with this calming blanket of blessing. And because these plants have such unique roles, they're historically used in a highly logical sequence during a ritual. It's a very clear, step-by-step procedure. Step 1, erase. You burn sage first to wipe the slate clean. It acts like a spiritual disinfectant. Step 2, speak. Now that you have a clean environment, you offer tobacco to open up that channel of communication to the creator. And step 3, seal. Finally, you burn sweetgrass to invite peaceful, healing blessings to fill that void the sage left behind. It takes these really big, abstract spiritual concepts and turns them into a beautiful, practical framework for mindfulness. All right, Section 3, the power of community, featuring the three sisters. Shifting gears a bit from ceremonial smoke over to agriculture, let's explore the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois tradition of the three sisters. Now, this isn't just a neat farming trick, it's a profound, living philosophy of community. To really get the genius of the three sisters, we first have to look at them separated, functioning in the state of rugged individualism. And when we do that, well, we see some pretty fatal weaknesses. If you plant corn all by itself, it's super vulnerable to high winds, and it just rapidly depletes all the nitrogen right out of the soil. If you plant beans alone, their vines lack any structural support, so they're just going to sprawl uselessly in the dirt. And if you plant squash alone, its massive leaves leave the surrounding soil totally exposed to the harsh, drying sun. On their own, every single one of these plants really struggles.
But when you bring them together in synthesis, we see something absolutely incredible. According to Haudenosaunee oral history, these plants are sacred sisters who simply refuse to be separated. And ecologically speaking, it's a total engine of mutual aid. The corn grows tall and straight, giving the beans a natural wooden trellis to climb. In return, the beans harbor these symbiotic bacteria on their roots that literally pull nitrogen out of the air, creating rich fertilizer to feed that hungry corn. And the squash? It sprawls low to the ground, using its wide prickly leaves like a living mulch. It shades the soil, locks in the moisture, and even deters pests. It's just a stunning metaphor, isn't it? Showing that we humans too have our individual gifts and our fatal weaknesses. True survival, real resilience, only happens when we lean on each other and share our resources. Which brings us to Section 4, Wisdom of the Bear and the amazing OSHA root. So this whole idea of observing and learning from the relationships in nature perfectly applies to a legendary medicinal plant known as OSHA root. Now, what's truly fascinating here is how this indigenous medical knowledge was actually developed in the first place. It wasn't about humans trying to dominate or conquer nature. It was all about the teacher-student relationship. It starts in the spring. The mighty grizzly bear emerges from its winter hibernation, right? And it's sluggish, it's weak, maybe even wounded. Well, days later, indigenous hunters observed the bear actively seeking out this specific fern-like OSHA plant. The bear would literally chew the root into a wet pulp and eat it for vitality, or even pack it directly onto its wounds. By watching this recognized animal teacher, humans figured out that this root had immense respiratory and antimicrobial properties. Over generations, humans adopted this bear medicine to treat coughs and colds. But here's the key. They always leave an offering of cornmeal or tobacco at the base of the plant, to honor the animal teacher that shared its wisdom.
Finally, we've reached Section 5, Ethics of the Harvest, the Return. Okay, so all of these beautiful ancient stories and philosophies, they bring us to the reality of today. How do we actually interact with these living teachers in the modern world? Because unfortunately, due to a massive surge in global popularity, especially with practices like smudging using wild white sage, we're seeing severe commercial poaching and over-harvesting right now. To combat this, indigenous practitioners are urging us to remember the strict protocols of the harvest. First up is reciprocity. You never, ever take without giving. You always leave an offering to honor the plant nation before you harvest. Second is restraint. You approach with a quiet mind, you take only what is absolutely needed, and you never strip a single plant bare. You have to ensure that bush remains healthy enough to thrive for the next generation. And third is reverence. You never treat sacred medicine casually. If pieces break off, you return them directly to the earth. You don't just toss them in your household trash. We really must treat these plants as relatives, not as disposable retail trends. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative question to chew on. How will you change your relationship with the natural world today? Because the ultimate takeaway from all this Native American plant wisdom is this. True healing and sustainability only begin when we stop looking at the earth as just a resource to be extracted and start treating it as a community of relatives to be deeply respected. Think about those three sisters leaning on each other, or the sweetgrass woven together in unity. The next time you step outside, I really challenge you to look at the plants around you not just as biology, but as living teachers with real lessons to share. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep learning.